I stood frozen in the center of the Crystal Ballroom at the Silver Lake Country Club. I had just signed a check for $35,000 to cover the catering and venue costs for this event. My father, Richard, was holding a microphone on stage. His arm was wrapped tightly around the waist of his stepdaughter, Bella. He looked down at me standing near the service entrance next to a tray of empty champagne flutes. He told the crowd of 200 distinguished guests that the family was blessed to have me as their devoted behind-the-scenes helper. He said I sacrificed my personal happiness because no man wanted to marry a woman who lived to serve her younger sister. The room erupted in laughter. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks. But the shock did not stop there. He raised his glass and announced he was gifting the lakefront estate as a wedding present to Bella and her fiancé Julian. He seemed to have forgotten that the name on the deed was not his. It was mine. What would you do if your own father gave away your home to someone else right in front of your face? Would you scream? Would you cry? Or would you wait for the perfect moment to destroy their fantasy? Let me know in the comments below. My hands were shaking, but not from nervousness. They were shaking from a rage so cold it felt like ice in my veins. I looked around the room. I saw the faces of the local elite. I saw Julian's parents, who owned half the real estate in Seattle. They were clapping politely. They looked at me with a mixture of pity and amusement. To them, I was exactly what my father had just described. I was Victoria the spinster. I was Victoria the doormat. I was the 37-year-old woman who wore last season's clothes and drove a 5-year-old sedan, so her family could drive Porsches and wear Versace. I took a sip of water to steady myself. The irony of the situation was almost suffocating. This party was supposed to be a celebration of love. In reality, it was a celebration of theft. My father, Richard, looked handsome in his tuxedo. He had the kind of silver hair and distinguished jawline that made people trust him instantly. It was the same look that had convinced investors to give him millions 10 years ago. It was the same look that had lost those millions and left him on the brink of bankruptcy 5 years ago. I remember the day he came to my office. I was a strategy director for a major tech firm in downtown Seattle. I was 32 then, and I had just received a massive promotion. My father sat in my glass-walled office and wept. He told me the bank was taking the house. He told me Monica would leave him if they lost their status. He told me Bella would have to drop out of her private university. He begged me to save him. I did what any dutiful daughter would do. I used my savings. I liquidated my stock options. I bought the debt from the bank. I paid off the arrears. I put the deed in my name. We made a verbal agreement. They could live there to maintain appearances. They would pay the utilities and taxes. I would live in the guest wing and we would be a family. It was a temporary solution. Or so I thought. 5 years had passed since that day. The temporary solution had become a permanent nightmare. Somewhere along the line, they stopped being grateful. Somewhere along the line, they started believing their own lies. They told the neighbors that I moved back in because I was lonely. They told the community that I had failed in my career and needed their support. They treated me like a live-in maid who paid the mortgage. Tonight was the culmination of that delusion. Bella looked radiant in a white silk dress that cost $4,000. I knew the price because the charge alert had popped up on my phone last week. She was 24. She called herself a lifestyle influencer. In reality, she influenced nothing but my bank account balance. She stood there beaming at the crowd, accepting a house she did not own from a man who did not own it. Monica stood slightly behind them. My stepmother was wearing a heavy diamond necklace. It was a piece from my late mother's collection. I had not seen it in years. I thought it was in the safety deposit box. Seeing it around her neck made my stomach turn. She caught my eye and smirked. It was a small, triumphant smile. It said, "We won." It said, "You are nothing." I wanted to walk up to that stage. I wanted to grab the microphone. I wanted to tell Julian's wealthy parents that their future daughter-in-law was a fraud. I wanted to tell them that Richard was insolvent. I wanted to tell them that the lavish lifestyle they saw was funded by the plain woman in the corner whom they had ignored all evening. But I did not move. I learned in my line of work that you do not strike when you are angry. You strike when you have the leverage. You strike when the enemy is overextended. And right now they were celebrating. They were drunk on champagne and hubris. They felt safe. That was when they were most vulnerable. My phone buzzed in my clutch. I ignored it at first. Then it buzzed again. And again. It was a persistent rhythm that demanded attention. I stepped back into the shadow of a large decorative fern and pulled the phone out. It was an email from our family attorney, Mr. Henderson. The subject line was simply urgent authorization required. I frowned. Mr. Henderson had been my father's lawyer for decades, but he knew I held the purse strings. I opened the email. Attached was a document. It was a power of attorney form. It authorized Richard to transfer the title of the lakefront property to a trust controlled by Bella and Julian. The signature at the bottom was mine, but I had never signed it. The date on the signature was this morning. I zoomed in on the signature. It was a good forgery. It looked almost exactly like mine, but there was a slight hesitation on the loop of the V. My hand never hesitated. I looked up from the phone. I looked at the stage again. Richard was hugging Julian now. He was welcoming him to the family. He was promising him a legacy. He was giving away my life's work with a forged signature and a smile. The coldness in my veins turned into something else. It turned into clarity. For 5 years I had been protecting them. I had been protecting their ego. I had been protecting their secrets. I had been protecting a father who just committed a felony against his own daughter. The waiter walked by with a tray of champagne. I reached out and took a glass. I did not drink it. I just held it. The condensation felt cool against my skin. I watched them celebrate my financial execution. I realized then that the woman who walked into this party was gone. The dutiful daughter was dead. The sister who steamed dresses and paid bills was dead. Standing in her place was someone else entirely. Standing in her place was the strategy director who specialized in hostile takeovers and corporate liquidation. I slid the phone back into my purse. I smoothed the front of my simple navy dress. I did not leave the party. Leaving would look like defeat. Instead, I walked over to the bar. I ordered a double Scotch neat. I turned my back to the stage and watched the room. I began to calculate. I began to plan. If they wanted a show, I would give them a show. But the ending would be very different from the one they imagined. To understand why I stood there drinking scotch while my father gave away my property, you have to understand the slow, systematic erosion of my identity over the last 5 years. It did not happen overnight. If Richard had asked me on day 1 to be his live-in maid-in financier, I would have laughed in his face. But abuse does not start with a slap. It starts with a favor. It starts with a sigh. It starts with a guilt trip about a dead mother and a struggling father. The arrangement began with boundaries that dissolved so slowly, I hardly noticed them disappearing. In the first month after I bought the house back from the bank, we had a family meeting. We sat at the mahogany dining table that I had just paid to save from the repo men. Richard held my hand. He had tears in his eyes. He said I was the savior of the family. He promised that he would take care of the maintenance and the gardening while Monica would handle the cooking. They insisted I take the master suite because it was my house. By the 3rd month, I was in the guest room. It started with a comment from Monica about her sciatica. She said the stairs to the master suite were too steep for her bad back. She said the guest room on the ground floor was damp and made her joints ache. Richard looked at me with those puppy dog eyes. He said it was just until Monica felt better. He said I was young and strong and could handle the stairs. So I moved my things. I moved out of the room with the lake view and the soaking tub into the smaller room near the garage that smelled faintly of gasoline and exhaust fumes. By the 6th month, the cooking stopped. Monica claimed the kitchen layout was not intuitive for her. She said my pots and pans were cheap and burned the food. She started leaving takeout menus on the counter. Then she started leaving grocery lists. They were not requests. They were demands. Organic almond milk. Imported truffles. Wagyu beef steaks. If I bought the store brand, she would leave it rotting on the counter and say she could not eat garbage. I started waking up at 5 in the morning to prepare meals before I went to work just to avoid the passive-aggressive notes. The financial bleeding was even more insidious. I gave Richard a credit card for household emergencies. I told him it was for plumbing leaks or electrical repairs. The first month, the bill was $300 for groceries. Acceptable. The second month, it was $2,000. There were charges for a spa day and a designer handbag. When I confronted him, he laughed it off. He said he wanted to treat Monica because she was depressed about their financial fall. He said I should be happy to help lift her spirits. He said family helps family. I paid the bill. I paid it because I was making $300,000 a year, and I felt guilty for my success while my father had nothing. I told myself it was a small price to pay for his dignity. But dignity is a bottomless pit when you're dealing with narcissists. Living with Monica and Bella was like living with two hostile roommates who were allergic to gratitude. Bella was 19 when they moved in. She was a college dropout who claimed she was taking a gap year to find herself. Finding herself apparently involved sleeping until noon and scattering her belongings across every surface of my home. I would come home after a 14-hour day of managing corporate mergers to find the living room look like a bomb had gone off. Takeout boxes, empty wine bottles, makeup palettes shattered on my Persian rugs. If I asked Bella to clean up, she would roll her eyes and call Richard. She would cry. She would say I was bullying her. She would say I was jealous of her youth and freedom because I was just a boring corporate drone. And Richard would take her side. Always. He would pull me into the hallway and whisper that I needed to be more understanding. He would say Bella was fragile. He would say she was going through a hard time adjusting to their loss of status. He told me I was the strong one, the resilient one. He weaponized my competence against me. He made me feel that demanding respect was an act of cruelty against those weaker than me. The worst part was the social isolation. They treated the house as their personal country club and I was the staff. They threw dinner parties for their old friends from the club. They used my crystal. They drank my wine. They ate the food I paid for. But I was never invited to sit at the table. I remember one specific night last Christmas. I had spent $600 on a prime rib roast. I had spent 4 hours cooking it exactly the way Richard liked it, rare with a horseradish crust. When the guests arrived, Monica shooed me into the kitchen. She told me I looked tired. She told me my outfit was too office casual for a formal dinner. She said it would be better if I ate in the den so I could relax. I stood in the kitchen doorway and watched them. I watched Richard carve the roast. I heard him tell a joke that made everyone laugh. I heard a guest ask where Victoria was. Monica waved her hand dismissively. She said Victoria is working. She is always working. Poor thing has no life. She is married to her laptop. I went to the den. I sat on the old sofa with a plate of lukewarm potatoes and meat. I could hear their laughter through the wall. I felt a physical pain in my chest that had nothing to do with heartburn. It was the crushing weight of realization that I was paying $4,000 a month in mortgage and taxes for a house where I was not welcome. But I stayed. I stayed because of a promise I made to my mother on her deathbed 10 years ago. She knew Richard was weak. She knew he was vain. But she loved him. She made me promise to look after him. She grabbed my hand with her frail fingers and said, "Do not let him end up alone, Victoria. He cannot survive alone." I held on to that promise like a life raft. I told myself I was honoring her memory. I told myself I was being the good daughter. But in reality, I was just an enabler. I was funding their delusion that they were still wealthy aristocrats. The abuse escalated when Bella started dating Julian. Julian came from old money, the kind of money that builds libraries and buys senators. When he started coming over, the dynamic in the house shifted from negligence to active concealment. They started hiding me. If Julian was coming for dinner, Monica would text me and tell me to stay late at the office. If I was home on a Saturday morning, they would ask me to stay in my room or go run errands so I would not be in the way. They were ashamed of me. They were ashamed that the owner of the house did not look like a socialite. I did not have Botox. I did not wear Gucci loafers indoors. I looked like what I was. A tired, overworked executive who carried the weight of 4 adults on her back. One Saturday morning about 3 months ago, I came downstairs to get coffee. I was wearing my pajamas. Just a simple cotton set. Old and comfortable. Julian was in the kitchen with Bella. He was making her an espresso with the machine I bought. "Oh," Julian said when he saw me. He looked surprised. "I didn't know the housekeeper was here today." I froze. I looked at Bella. She did not correct him. She did not say, "Actually, Julian, this is my stepsister, and she owns this house." She just laughed. A tinkling, artificial sound. Victoria is so dedicated, Bella said, taking the coffee from him. She practically lives here to help us out. We don't know what we'd do without her. I looked at my father, who was sitting at the island reading the paper. He heard it. He heard his stepdaughter call me the housekeeper. He heard the man she wanted to marry dismiss me as help. Richard lowered the paper. He looked at me. For a second I thought he would speak up. I thought he would have a moment of spinal fortitude. But he just looked at my old pajamas. He looked at my messy hair. And he looked back at the paper. Victoria, he said without looking up. While you're up, can you check if the dry cleaning is ready? I need my tuxedo for the gala next week. That moment broke something in me. It was a hairline fracture in my resolve. It wasn't enough to make me kick them out then and there, but it was the start of the awakening. I walked back to my room without coffee. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall. I realized then that they didn't just use me. They despised me. They despised me because they needed me. My existence was a constant reminder of their failure. Every time I paid a bill, every time I fixed a leak, every time I filled the fridge, it was proof that Richard was not the provider. It was proof that Monica was not the lady of the manor. So they had to diminish me. They had to turn me into a servant in their minds, so that taking my money felt like a transaction rather than charity. The final insult came 2 weeks before the engagement party. I came home early from a business trip to San Francisco. I was exhausted. I just wanted a hot shower. When I walked into my bathroom, I saw my expensive face creams were open and half empty. My specialized shampoos were drained. I went to Bella's room. The door was open. She was live streaming to her followers. She was sitting at her vanity table. My vanity table that she had moved into her room. She was holding up my limited edition Chanel bag. The one I bought myself as a bonus for closing a $10 million deal. Guys, look at this vintage find, Bella was saying to the camera. My daddy got it for me. He spoils me so much. It's so hard being the favorite daughter. She dropped the bag on the floor, on the dirty carpet where her dog had had an accident the week before. I walked in. I picked up the bag. Hey, Bella shouted. I'm filming. Get out. This is my bag, I said. My voice was calm, but my hand was gripping the leather, so hard my knuckles were white. Dad said I could borrow it, she sneered. Put it back. You don't even use it. You go to work and come home. You have nowhere to wear a bag like that. It's wasted on you. Wasted. That was the word Richard used too. Whenever I talked about my savings or my investments, he would say it was wasted on a single woman with no family. He would say money is meant to be enjoyed, not hoarded. He implied that my financial responsibility was actually a character flaw. A sign of my coldness. I took the bag to my room and locked the door. That night I did not sleep. I pulled up my bank records. I pulled up the deed to the house. I started looking at the numbers not as a daughter but as an auditor. I saw the patterns, the gaslighting, the theft, the systematic erasure of my ownership. I realized that if I died tomorrow, they would not mourn me. They would mourn the loss of their income stream. They would probably be annoyed that they had to deal with the paperwork of my estate. And yet, even knowing all of this, I still went to the engagement party. I still paid the $35,000 for the venue. Why? Because a part of me, the damaged little girl part, still hoped that on this big day my father would acknowledge me. I hoped he would stand on that stage and thank me. I hoped he would say this is all possible because of my daughter Victoria. I was a fool. A rich, successful, pathetic fool. But as I stood at the bar in the Silver Lake Country Club, finishing my scotch, the fool was finally dead. The housekeeper was dead. The doormat was dead. Richard's voice boomed over the microphone again. And now, he said, I want to propose a toast to the future. To Julian and Bella. May your life in the lake house be filled with joy. I signaled the bartender for another drink. Not for courage, but for celebration. Because Richard didn't know it yet, but he had just handed me the weapon I needed to destroy him. He had made a public claim to property he didn't own. He had committed fraud in front of 200 witnesses. I took out my phone again. I opened the app for the home security system. I checked the cameras in the living room. It was empty. Good. Then I opened my banking app. I scrolled to the joint account I shared with Richard. The one I deposited $5,000 into every month for household expenses. Balance: $4,200. I hit transfer. I moved every cent back to my personal savings. Then I went to the credit card portal. The card Richard had in his wallet. The one he was probably planning to use to pay for the open bar tonight. Status active. I hit report lost/stolen. I hit cancel immediately. I put the phone down on the bar. The screen went black. The first domino had been pushed. Now I just had to wait for the crash. I left the engagement party 10 minutes after I canceled the credit cards. I did not say goodbye. I slipped out the side door while the guests were distracted by the cutting of the cake. The cake was a 5-tier monstrosity that cost $2,000. I knew the price because I had written the check for the bakery 3 weeks ago. As I walked to the valet stand, the cool night air felt like a reprieve from the suffocating atmosphere of the ballroom. The valet brought my car around. It was a reliable 5-year-old sedan that Monica frequently called an eyesore. As I waited, I looked across the parking lot. There, under the harsh light of a street lamp, sat a brand new convertible sports car. It was cherry red with a giant white bow on the hood. The license plate read Bella 24. My stomach tightened. 2 months ago, I gave Richard $50,000. He told me it was the deposit for the wedding venue. He said the Silver Lake Country Club required a large down payment to secure the date. He showed me an invoice. I realize now that the invoice was likely a fabrication created on a home computer. The venue cost $35,000, which I paid tonight. The $50,000 I gave him previously had parked itself right there in the lot on 4 rubber tires. I drove home in silence. The house was dark when I arrived. It loomed against the night sky, a massive structure of stone and glass that I owned but did not possess. I unlocked the front door and stepped into the foyer. The silence was heavy. Usually I retreated to my room immediately to avoid conflict. But tonight the house was empty. They were all at the party celebrating their fraud. This was my chance. I did not go to my room. I went straight to Richard's study. The study was technically my home office, but Richard had commandeered it years ago. He said he needed a space to manage the family investments. I knew there were no investments to manage, but I let him have it to keep the peace. The room smelled of expensive cigars and old leather. I sat down at his desk. It was a beautiful antique oak desk that had belonged to my grandfather. I opened his laptop. He had never changed the password. It was still the name of his first dog, followed by the year he was born. I typed it in. The screen flared to life. I started with the bank statements. I logged into his personal email to bypass the 2-factor authentication for the accounts I did not have access to. What I found was a forensic map of betrayal. The $50,000 for the venue deposit was indeed gone. It had been transferred to a luxury car dealership in Bellevue. But that was just the tip of the iceberg. I saw withdrawals for cash at casinos. I saw payments to a high-end jeweler. I saw a recurring monthly payment of $3,000 to an account named PR Management. I searched his email for PR Management. The search results made my blood run cold. PR stood for Public Reputation. It was a service that bought fake followers and bought comments for social media influencers. I clicked on the invoices. For the last 3 years, my hard-earned salary had been funding Bella's online career. Every like, every comment, every viral moment she bragged about was paid for with my money. Richard was spending $3,000 a month to buy his stepdaughter an imaginary fan base while telling me I needed to work harder to support the family. But the financial theft was something I could recover from. Money is renewable. Trust is not. What I found next destroyed whatever lingering affection I had for my father. I minimized the browser and saw a folder on the desktop labeled Legal. My heart rate spiked. I clicked on it. Inside were several PDF documents and a long email thread with a lawyer named Mr. Sterling. Mr. Sterling was not our family attorney, Mr. Henderson. Mr. Sterling was known in the city as a shark who specialized in aggressive estate litigation. I opened the most recent email. It was dated 3 days ago. Subject regarding the competency hearing. I felt the room spin. I gripped the edge of the desk to steady myself. Competency hearing. That was a legal term used when someone was unable to manage their own affairs due to mental illness or incapacity. I began to read. Monica had written the initial email. She outlined a narrative that made me sound like a recluse. She described my long hours at work as manic episodes. She described my lack of social life as a symptom of severe depression and antisocial personality disorder. She claimed that I was unstable and prone to erratic financial decisions. The erratic financial decisions she listed were the times I threatened to stop paying their bills. She wrote that for my own safety, the court should appoint a conservator to manage my assets, specifically the lakefront property and my investment portfolio. And the proposed conservator was Richard. I scrolled down to read Richard's reply. I prayed to a God I had not spoken to in years that he had shut this down. I prayed that he had told her this was insanity, that he would never do this to his own daughter. His reply was 2 sentences long. I am worried she might fight this. Make sure the medical evaluation is done by the doctor you recommended who understands our situation. He agreed. My father, the man I had saved from bankruptcy, the man whose dignity I had protected for 5 years. He was plotting to have me declared mentally incompetent so he could steal my house legally. He was willing to strip me of my rights, my freedom, and my reputation just so he wouldn't have to get a job. I leaned back in the chair. A sound escaped my throat. It was a dry, ragged gasp. I didn't cry. I think I was beyond tears. The pain was too absolute for tears. It felt like a physical blow, like someone had taken a sledgehammer to my chest. I thought about the last 5 years. I thought about the weekends I spent fixing the roof because Richard said it was too expensive to hire a contractor. I thought about the vacations I skipped to pay for Bella's tuition. I thought about the nights I sat alone in my room listening to them laugh downstairs, wondering what I had done wrong to be so unlovable. I hadn't done anything wrong. I was simply the host organism. And the parasites had decided that feeding off me wasn't enough. They wanted to consume me entirely. I looked at the clock. It was 11:30 at night. They would be home soon. The shock began to recede, replaced by a cold mechanical precision. I was a strategy director. My job was to anticipate threats and neutralize them. I had just discovered a hostile takeover attempt in my own living room. I reached into my purse and pulled out a flash drive. I plugged it into the laptop. I began to copy everything. The bank statements, the invoices for the car, the receipts for the fake followers, and most importantly, the email thread with Mr. Sterling. I also found a draft of the power of attorney document, the one with the forged signature I had seen earlier on my phone. I copied that too. Then I went deeper. I checked the deleted items folder. People like Richard and Monica were arrogant. They rarely emptied the trash. In the deleted folder, I found an email from Julian to Bella. It was dated last week. Julian wrote that his parents were asking for proof of the house title before the wedding. He said they were suspicious because the property tax records online still showed my name. Bella's reply was chilling. Don't worry, babe. Daddy is handling it. The witch is going to be out of the picture soon. We're just waiting for the paperwork to go through. Once she's declared unfit, we can transfer the title. Just keep your parents happy until the wedding. The witch. That was what my sister called me. The woman who bought her bags. The woman who paid for her hair extensions. The woman who was currently paying for the champagne she was drinking. I finished copying the files. I ejected the drive and put it in my bra. I wanted it close to my skin. I wanted to feel the hard edges of the plastic against my body, reminding me of reality. I shut down the laptop. I wiped the keyboard with a tissue to remove my fingerprints. I pushed the chair back to exactly the position it was in before. I walked out of the study and went to the kitchen. I needed to see one last thing. On the fridge was a magnetic calendar. Monica used it to track their social engagements. I looked at the date for next Monday. Written in red marker was a single entry.
Victoria Intervention.
10 Uhr morgens. They weren't just going to serve me legal papers. They were planning an ambush. They were going to corner me, likely with their paid-off doctor present, and try to force me into a facility or pressure me into signing over my rights under duress. I stared at the red ink. Intervention. Fine. If they wanted an intervention, I would give them one. But it wouldn't be on Monday. And it wouldn't be for me. I heard the sound of a car engine in the driveway. The headlights swept across the kitchen window. They were home. I moved quickly. I went to the back door, the one that led to the garden, and unlocked it slightly so I could come back in later if needed. Then I ran up the back stairs to my room. I changed out of my dress into my pajamas. I brushed my teeth. I washed my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes looked different. The softness was gone. The hesitation was gone. The woman staring back at me looked dangerous. I turned off the lights and got into bed just as I heard the front door open. I heard Bella's high-pitched laughter. I heard Monica complaining about her feet. I heard Richard's booming voice telling them what a success the night had been. "Did you see her face when I announced the house?" Richard laughed. "She looked like she swallowed a lemon." "She's so pathetic," Bella said. "I bet she's up here crying into her pillow." "Let her cry," Monica said, her voice drifting up the stairs. "Enjoy it while it lasts, Victoria. Monday is coming." I lay in the dark staring at the ceiling. My hand rested on my chest over the flash drive hidden in my bra. "Yes, Monica. Monday is coming. But so is Sunday. And tomorrow is Sunday." I closed my eyes, but I didn't sleep. I began to draft the script for the next day. I mentally listed the calls I needed to make, the locks I needed to change, the security team I needed to hire. I had the evidence. I had the motive. And now, thanks to their drunken confession downstairs, I had the timeline. The victim in me died in that study. The executioner was born. And she was ready to go to work. Sunday morning arrived with a deceptive calm. I woke up at 6 and went for a long run along the lake. The water was gray and choppy, reflecting the storm brewing inside me. When I returned, the house was buzzing with activity. Monica and Bella were in the kitchen surrounded by garment bags and makeup artists. They were preparing for the main event tonight. Richard was in his tuxedo early, drinking a mimosa and looking out at the lawn where a large white tent was being erected. None of them looked at me. None of them offered me a drink. I was invisible again. I went to the kitchen to get a bottle of water, and Monica snapped at me to move out of the way of the hairstylist. I spent the rest of the day in my room making phone calls. I spoke to Mr. Henderson. I spoke to a private security firm. I spoke to an estate agent I had worked with in the past. By 4 in the afternoon, the pieces of my counter-offensive were in place. The party started at 7. It was a black tie affair, more lavish than the engagement dinner 2 nights ago. Bella wanted a garden party under the stars. There were thousands of fairy lights draped in the trees, and a string quartet playing near the rose bushes. The air smelled of expensive perfume and jasmine. Julian's parents were there, looking even more imposing than before. They were surrounded by their circle of influence: judges, bank owners, and city council members. I arrived late on purpose. I did not wear the simple navy dress from Friday. I wore a tailored black suit that cost more than Bella's car. It was sharp, professional, and intimidating. When I walked into the garden, the music seemed to stutter for a second. Monica saw me and her eyes widened. She hurried over and tried to grab my arm to steer me toward the back. "Victoria, what are you doing?" she hissed. "This is not the time for your corporate costume. You look like you are going to a board meeting. Go change into something softer. You are ruining the aesthetic of the photos." I looked at her hand on my arm until she let go. "I am not a prop for your photos, Monica," I said. My voice was quiet, but it had a new edge that made her flinch. "I am here to celebrate my sister. Isn't that what you wanted?" I walked past her into the crowd. I saw Richard near the podium. He was holding a glass of vintage scotch. My scotch. He saw me and his smile faltered. He looked at my suit and then at the way I was standing. Straight, tall, and unyielding. He knew something had changed. He tried to ignore it by turning back to Julian's father. The moment of the grand announcement came at 9. Richard tapped a silver spoon against his glass. The quartet stopped playing. The guests gathered around the podium. Bella and Julian stood next to him, looking like a couple from a bridal magazine. Bella was glowing. She looked at the crowd with an expression of pure entitlement. "My friends," Richard began, his voice booming with artificial warmth. "Today we celebrate the union of 2 great families. We celebrate love. We celebrate the future. And as a father, I want to ensure that my daughter Bella starts her new life with the stability she deserves." He paused for dramatic effect. He looked at me for a split second. There was no love in his eyes. There was only a cold warning. As many of you know, Richard continued, our family has been through a period of transition, but we have persevered. And today I am proud to announce that as a wedding gift, I am transferring the full title of the Bennett Lake estate to Bella and Julian. It is their new home. A legacy for the next generation. The guests applauded. Bella hugged him and whispered something in his ear. Monica was wiping away fake tears. Julian's father stepped forward and shook Richard's hand. It was a done deal in their minds. They had publicly claimed the prize. Richard looked back at the microphone. And I want to thank my other daughter, Victoria, he said, his voice dripping with condescension. Victoria has lived with us during this transition. She has been a great help with the domestic duties. But as she is a woman of independent means and has decided to focus on her career, she will be moving into a private residence in the city tomorrow to give the happy couple the space they need. The crowd looked at me. Some were smiling pityingly. Others were whispering about the spinster sister being kicked out. I saw Bella smirking. I saw Monica looking at me with a triumphant glare. This was the intervention they had planned. They weren't waiting for Monday. They decided to do it tonight in front of everyone, so I would be too ashamed to fight back. They thought the social pressure would break me. I felt a surge of adrenaline so powerful it made my fingertips tingle. I didn't feel shame. I felt a cold, absolute clarity. This was the giant Nuoc Tranawai. The final drop that broke the dam. Richard started to step down from the podium, but I moved faster. I walked up the 3 steps before he could leave. I took the microphone from his hand. He gripped it for a second, trying to hold on, but I leaned in and whispered into his ear, "Let go of the mic, Dad, or I tell them about the forged power of attorney right now." His face went pale. His hand dropped. I took the microphone and turned to the crowd. I smiled. It was a sharp, dangerous smile. "Thank you, Father, for those kind words," I said. My voice was amplified by the speakers echoing through the trees. It's true that tonight is about legacy. It's about the truth of who we are as a family. I saw Julian's parents frowning. I saw Bella's face go from joy to confusion. Monica started to move toward the stage, but I gestured to the 2 men in dark suits standing at the edge of the tent. My security team. They stepped forward and blocked her path. "My father is right about one thing," I continued. "I am a woman of independent means, and I am very focused on my career. In fact, my firm specializes in risk assessment and asset liquidation, which is why I found his announcement so interesting." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small remote. I pointed it at the large screen behind the podium where a slideshow of Bella and Julian had been playing. I clicked the button. The screen changed. It wasn't a picture of the happy couple. It was a high-resolution scan of the property deed. My name, Victoria Bennett, was highlighted in bright yellow. "This is the deed to the lake house," I told the guests. "As you can see, it belongs to me. It has belonged to me exclusively for 5 years. My father does not have the legal authority to gift this house to anyone because he does not own a single brick of it." A gasp went through the crowd. I saw Julian's father take a step back. Richard was standing frozen next to me, his mouth hanging open. I clicked the button again. The screen showed the bank statements I had found in the study. The $50,000 car payment. The $3,000 monthly invoices for fake followers. The casino withdrawals. "I also wanted to clear up the confusion about my role in this house," I said. "I am not the domestic help. I am the landlord. I have been paying for every meal, every bottle of wine, and every piece of jewelry you see tonight." My father's vision of a legacy was funded entirely by my salary, while he was plotting with his wife to have me declared mentally incompetent so they could steal this property. I looked at Julian's parents. "Mr. and Mrs. Sterling, I believe you were promised a merger of equals. I think you should know that your future daughter-in-law's entire public persona is a paid fabrication. Her father is currently under investigation for identity theft and document forgery." Bella screamed. "You bitch," she yelled, moving toward the stage. "You're ruining everything." I didn't blink. "No, Bella," I said. "You ruined everything when you called me the housekeeper in my own kitchen. You ruined everything when you thought my hard work was a weakness to be exploited." I turned back to Richard. He looked like he was having a heart attack. He tried to reach for the mic, but I stepped away. "I have already filed a police report for the forged power of attorney I saw on your desk," Richard I said. And the car Bella is driving was bought with embezzled funds. The police are waiting at the gates of the club right now to take a statement. I looked at the crowd. The silence was absolute. The fairy lights were still twinkling, but the magic was gone. The facade had crumbled into dust. I am moving into a private residence tomorrow, I told them. But it won't be a small apartment in the city. I'm moving into the master suite of this house. Because I have just signed the eviction papers for the occupants of the guest wing. I dropped the microphone. It hit the wooden floor with a loud thud that echoed through the silent garden. I walked down the steps past my father, who was now slumped against the podium. I walked past Monica, who was sobbing hysterically. I walked past Bella, who was being questioned by a very angry Julian. I walked straight to my car. I didn't look back. The air felt cleaner now. The weight was gone. I drove out of the country club past the 2 patrol cars that were just pulling in. The giant Newark Tran LY had become a flood. And for the first time in 5 years, I wasn't the one drowning. I checked into the Four Seasons Hotel in downtown Seattle 40 minutes after leaving the country club. The receptionist did not blink at my request for the presidential suite. She knew who I was. Not Victoria, the downtrodden daughter, but Victoria Bennett, the woman who had just closed a merger worth $200 million the previous week. I ordered a bottle of champagne and sat by the window overlooking the city lights. My phone had been vibrating incessantly since I left the party, but I had set it to direct all calls from my family to voicemail. I did, however, answer the call that came in at 11 o'clock. It was a number I recognized immediately. It belonged to Archibald Sterling, Julian's father and the CEO of Sterling Industries. "Ms. Bennett," he said. His voice was grave. There was none of the jovial condescension he had shown earlier in the evening. "I believe I owe you an apology." "You don't owe me anything, Archibald," I said, taking a sip of champagne. "You were sold a false bill of goods. It happens to the best of investors." "I assume you know why I'm calling," he said. "Aside from the personal embarrassment of tonight. My legal team just informed me that your firm Vantage Strategy handles the risk assessment for our upcoming expansion in Asia. This was the twist that my family never saw coming because they never bothered to ask what I actually did for a living. They knew I worked in strategy, but they assumed it meant I was a mid-level manager pushing papers. They did not know that Vantage Strategy was my company. They did not know that I was the lead consultant advising Sterling Industries on whether to proceed with their biggest project of the decade. "That is correct," I said. "And based on the due diligence I performed tonight regarding the character of your potential in-laws, I would advise caution in any future mergers. If they are willing to defraud their own blood for a house, imagine what they would do to your shareholders." "There will be no merger," Archibald said coldly. "Julian has ended the engagement. And we have instructed our lawyers to cooperate fully with your investigation regarding the car. We do not want to be associated with embezzled funds. I hope this personal matter will not affect our professional relationship, Ms. Bennett. As long as the truth is respected, Archibald, business is business," I said. I hung up. The satisfaction was not hot or fiery. It was cool and settling. It was the feeling of a spreadsheet finally balancing out after days of errors. I opened my laptop and connected to the security cameras at the lake house. I wanted to see the fallout. The party at the club had obviously ended in disaster, so I expected them to return home to regroup and plan their next attack. I watched the feed from the driveway camera. At midnight, Richard's car pulled in. It was erratic, swerving slightly before hitting the curb. He stumbled out of the driver's side. His tuxedo was disheveled. Monica followed him, screaming something I couldn't hear, but her body language was frantic. Bella was the last to exit. She was holding her dress up to keep it from dragging on the pavement, but she wasn't walking with her usual arrogant strut. She was sobbing. They went inside. I switched to the living room camera. It was like watching a silent movie of a tragedy. Richard went straight to the liquor cabinet. He poured a drink, his hands shaking so badly he spilled half of it on the floor. Monica was pacing back and forth, gesturing wildly. She pointed at the phone, then at Richard, then at the ceiling. She was blaming him. She was panicking about the police report I mentioned. Then I saw Bella do something that made me smile. She picked up a vase. It was a Ming vase replica that Monica loved. And she threw it at the wall. It shattered into 1,000 pieces. Then she turned on her mother, screaming. I could read her lips. You said she was stupid. You said she was weak. They were cannibalizing each other. Without a common enemy to exploit, they turned their toxicity inward. I watched for another 10 minutes until Richard passed out on the sofa and Monica stormed upstairs. Then I closed the laptop. I had a busy day ahead of me. The next morning at 8 o'clock, I met my team at the coffee shop down the road from the lake house. I had assembled a small army, 2 private security guards, a locksmith, and a team of professional movers who specialized in rapid relocations. We arrived at the house at 8:30. I used my key to open the front gate. The house was silent. They were likely still asleep, hungover from the alcohol and the shock. I opened the front door and signaled the security team to wait in the foyer. I walked into the living room. Richard was still on the sofa, snoring loudly. The smell of stale alcohol was overpowering. "Good morning," I said loudly. Richard jerked awake. He fell off the sofa in his panic. He looked up at me with bleary red eyes. For a second he looked confused, then the memory of last night crashed down on him. His face twisted into a snarl. He spat. "You ungrateful bitch. Do you have any idea what you did?" Julian left her. "The Sterlings are threatening to sue us for emotional distress. You destroyed this family." "I didn't destroy anything, Richard," I said calmly. "I just turned on the lights. Now get up. You have until noon to vacate the premises." "I'm not going anywhere," he shouted, struggling to stand up. "This is my house. I have rights. That deed you showed was fake." "I know it was fake. I'm going to call the police." "Please do," I said. "The police already have the report about the forged power of attorney. And the car theft. If you call them, they will likely arrest you on the spot. Is that what you want?" He froze. The bluster drained out of him, leaving only fear. Monica appeared at the top of the stairs. She was wearing a silk robe and looked like she hadn't slept. "Victoria," she said. Her voice was trembling. She tried to soften her expression to summon the fake maternal warmth she used when she wanted something. "Victoria, darling, let's be reasonable. We are all upset. We said things we didn't mean. But you can't kick us out. We have nowhere to go." "That sounds like a strategy problem, Monica," I said. "And as you know, I charge $500 an hour for strategy consultations. Since you can't afford me, I suggest you start packing. We have squatters' rights." She hissed, dropping the act instantly. "We have lived here for 5 years. You have to give us 30 days notice." "Actually, I don't," I replied, pulling a document from my bag. "Because you aren't tenants. You never paid rent. You are guests. And in this state, the law regarding the removal of guests who have engaged in criminal activity against the homeowner is very clear. You threatened my safety with that competency hearing scheme. That counts as domestic abuse. I obtained an emergency restraining order this morning at 7 a.m. I motioned to the security guards. They stepped forward, crossing their arms. "These gentlemen will escort you to your rooms to pack your personal essentials," I said. "Anything you bought with my credit card stays. The furniture stays. The electronics stay. You take your clothes and your toiletries. That is it." Bella ran down the stairs then. She looked like a wreck. Her mascara was smeared down her cheeks. "You can't do this," she screamed. "My life is here. My studio is here. I have a brand deal to shoot tomorrow." "You can shoot it on the sidewalk," I said. "Maybe you can do a live stream about the consequences of fraud. It might go viral." The next 3 hours were a symphony of efficiency. The movers packed their clothes into cardboard boxes, not suitcases. I wanted them to feel the reality of their situation. Every time Bella tried to sneak a piece of jewelry or a designer bag into a box, the security guard stopped her and checked the receipt. If she couldn't prove she bought it with her own money, it stayed. At 11:45, they were standing on the driveway. 3 piles of boxes. No luxury cars. The police had towed the red convertible away an hour ago as evidence. Richard's leased sedan had been repossessed remotely by the dealership after I canceled the payments. Richard looked at the house. Then he looked at me. He tried one last manipulation. "Victoria," he said, his voice cracking. "I'm your father. Your mother would never have wanted this. She made you promise to take care of me." "I did take care of you," I said, stepping closer to him so he could see the resolve in my eyes. "I gave you a home for 5 years. I gave you dignity you didn't earn. I gave you a second chance. And you used it to try and lock me away in a mental institution so you could steal the roof over my head. I was desperate, he whispered. No, I said. You were greedy. And you were cruel. Mom wanted me to take care of you because she thought you were helpless. She didn't know you were a predator. And I don't protect predators. I liquidate them. I turned to the locksmith who was waiting by the front door. Change them, I said. All of them. I watched as a taxi pulled up. Monica had called it. She didn't look at me as she shoved her boxes into the trunk. Bella was typing furiously on her phone, probably trying to spin a story to her followers where she was the victim. Richard stood there for a moment longer looking at the empire he had lost. Then he slumped his shoulders and got into the back seat. As the taxi drove away, I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel guilty. I felt the same way I felt when I closed a bad account. It was a necessary correction. I walked back into the house. It was quiet. The negative energy that had permeated the walls for years seemed to have been sucked out with them. The movers were already starting to clear out the tacky furniture Monica had bought. I walked to the kitchen. I saw the coffee machine, the one Julian had used while calling me the housekeeper. I unplugged it and dropped it into the trash bin. Then I went to the fridge. I saw the magnetic calendar. The red ink was still there.
Victoria Intervention.
10 Uhr morgens. I looked at my watch. It was 12:15. Intervention successful, I whispered to the empty room. I walked out to the deck overlooking the lake. The water was calm now, shimmering under the midday sun. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with air that finally felt like it belonged to me. My phone buzzed again. It was a text from Mr. Henderson, my lawyer. Text from Mr. Henderson. The police have enough for an indictment on the forgery charges. And I just heard from the bank. They are freezing Richard's personal accounts pending the investigation into the elder abuse claims regarding your mother's estate, which we uncovered in the audit. It looks like he was skimming from her care fund before she died too. I stared at the screen. So it went back even further. He hadn't just used me. He had used my dying mother. Any lingering doubt I had vanished instantly. I typed a reply. Text to Mr. Henderson. Proceed with everything. Full prosecution. No plea deals. I put the phone down on the railing. I looked out at the water. I was 37 years old. I was alone in a massive house. I had no parents. I had no sister. But as I stood there feeling the sun on my face, I realized I wasn't alone. I was with the one person who had been trying to save me for years. Myself. 3 months have passed since the day I stood in the driveway and watched my family leave in a taxi. The transition from chaos to peace was not immediate. It was a gradual process, like the settling of dust after a demolition. The first week was filled with legal appointments and security upgrades. I had the locks changed within an hour of their departure. I installed a state-of-the-art perimeter alarm system. I hired a landscaping crew to tear out the rose bushes Monica had planted. I wanted to purge the soil of their memory. The house feels different now. It is no longer a stage for their pretenses. It is a home. My home. I converted Bella's room into a yoga studio. I turned the guest room where I used to sleep into a proper guest suite for friends who actually respect me. And Richard's study, the place where he plotted my demise, is now my private library. I replaced his heavy oak desk with a modern glass table. I replaced the smell of his cigars with the scent of sandalwood and fresh linen. The legal fallout for Richard was swift and merciless. Mr. Henderson was right about the bank. When they investigated the unauthorized transfers from my mother's care fund, they found a trail of embezzlement that went back 7 years. Richard had not just been stealing from me. He had been stealing from his dying wife. He had siphoned off money meant for her pain medication and palliative care to fund his gambling debts and Monica's wardrobe. That revelation was the final nail in the coffin of my guilt. Any lingering doubt I had about evicting him vanished. He was not a victim of circumstance. He was a monster who preyed on the vulnerable. The district attorney charged him with 3 counts of fraud, 2 counts of identity theft, and 1 count of elder abuse. Because of the overwhelming evidence, including the files I copied from his laptop, Richard accepted a plea deal to avoid a public trial. He is currently serving a 5-year sentence in a minimum security facility in upstate Washington. He tried to call me once from prison. Mr. Henderson forwarded the request. I declined it. I have nothing left to say to him. The daughter who craved his approval died the night he tried to have her declared incompetent. The woman who survived him has better things to do than listen to the apologies of a man who is only sorry he got caught. Monica fared no better. Without Richard's access to my credit, and without a home to host her social circle, she was quickly ostracized by the Seattle elite. The friends she tried to impress at the engagement party dropped her the moment the scandal broke. I heard from a mutual acquaintance that she filed for divorce 2 weeks after the eviction, claiming she was a victim of Richard's deception. The judge did not buy it. Since she had signed prenuptial agreements with Richard to protect her own non-existent assets, she walked away with nothing. Last week I was shopping at a high-end department store in downtown Seattle. I was buying a gift for a client. As I walked past the cosmetics counter, I saw a woman in a uniform wiping down the glass display. She looked older. Her face was tired, and the Botox had worn off, leaving deep lines of bitterness around her mouth. It was Monica. I stopped for a moment. She looked up and saw me. Her eyes widened. She started to open her mouth, perhaps to say something snide, perhaps to beg. I didn't give her the chance. I simply nodded once, a cold acknowledgement of her existence, and walked away. I didn't feel triumph. I felt indifference. She was just a stranger who used to live in my house. As for Bella, the crash was the hardest for her. The breakdown of her engagement to Julian was public and humiliating. Julian did not just leave her. He issued a press release through his father's company, distancing the Sterling family from the fraud. He exposed her lies about the house, the car, and her lifestyle. Bella tried to spin the narrative on social media. She posted a tearful video claiming she was the victim of a vindictive sister and a controlling father. She asked her followers for donations to help her get back on her feet. But the internet is a fickle beast. One of the receipt accounts I had anonymously tipped off posted the invoices for her fake followers. They posted the proof that her entire career was bought with stolen money. The backlash was brutal. She lost her sponsors. She lost her account. She was cancelled not by me but by the very lie she had constructed. I checked her profile yesterday out of curiosity. The account was deleted. I heard she moved back to her biological father's house in Ohio, a place she had always claimed was too rustic for her taste. She is working as a receptionist at a dental clinic. It is honest work. I hope it teaches her the value of a dollar earned rather than stolen. But the most important aftermath was not what happened to them. It was what happened to me. For years I defined my worth by how much I could give. I thought love was a transaction. I thought if I paid enough bills, if I solved enough problems, if I made myself small enough, they would finally love me. I was buying my own abuse and calling it loyalty. I learned that boundaries are not walls to keep people out. They are gates to protect the garden within. I had let weeds overgrow my garden because I was too afraid to pull them out. I was afraid of being alone. But I am not alone. The Saturday after the eviction, I hosted a dinner party. A real dinner party. I invited my team from Vantage Strategy. I invited Sarah, my attorney. I invited the few friends I had kept at arm's length during the dark years. We sat at the dining table. The same table where I used to eat leftovers alone. We ate food that I cooked. We drank wine that I poured. There was no tension. There was no criticism. There was laughter. Loud, genuine laughter that filled the high ceilings of the lake house. One of my colleagues, a brilliant architect named David, stayed behind to help me clean up. We stood on the deck watching the moonlight hit the water. He asked me if I ever regretted kicking them out. I looked at the lake. I thought about the fear, the anxiety, the migraines, the feeling of walking on eggshells in my own kitchen. I told him I only regretted not doing it sooner. David smiled. He took my hand. It was a simple gesture, but it felt monumental. It was the first time in years a man had touched me without wanting something from me. We're taking it slow. I am learning to trust again. I am learning that I don't have to be the savior. I can just be Victoria. This morning I woke up without an alarm. The sun was streaming through the windows of the master suite. I made myself a cup of coffee using a new machine. I sat on the balcony and looked at the property that is finally fully mine. I thought about the word failure. Richard called me a failure because I was unmarried and childless. He thought a woman's value lay in her attachments to others. He was wrong. Success is not about who you marry or who you give birth to. Success is the peace of mind that comes from knowing you are safe. Success is the ability to look in the mirror and like the person staring back. Success is the freedom to live your life on your own terms without apology. I am 37 years old. I have a demanding career. I have a beautiful home. I have a cat named Justice who is currently sleeping in a sunbeam on my rug. And for the first time in my life, I am rich. Not just in assets, but in the currency of peace. To anyone watching this who feels trapped in a toxic relationship, to anyone who feels that they owe their family their happiness, their money, or their sanity, please listen to me. You do not owe anyone your life. Biology is an accident of birth. Family is a choice. If the people who are supposed to love you are the ones holding the knife, you have the right to walk away. You have the right to close the account. You have the right to evict them from your heart. It will be scary. It will be painful. They will call you selfish. They will call you ungrateful. They will try to destroy you. Let them try. Because when the dust settles and the silence returns, you will find that the only person you ever really needed was there all along. You. If you have parents or siblings who drain you dry, do not wait for a miracle. Do not wait for them to change. They won't. Check your bank accounts. Check your credit reports. Trust your instincts. And if something feels wrong, act immediately. If this story made you feel something, hit the like button. If you think justice was served, leave a comment below telling me about a time you stood up for yourself. And if you know someone who needs to hear this warning, share this video with them. You might just save a life. Thank you for listening to my story. I am Victoria Bennett, and I am finally free.